The grand hall of the conclave was a weapon in itself, stretching for what felt like miles in every direction. Its walls were made of a living crystal that throbbed with a dim, soft light, shifting colors to mirror the emotions of the crowd. Right now, they were glowing a deep, angry crimson. Ambassador Yelena Vasquez stood all alone on the speaker's platform. By human standards, she was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with her gray hair pulled back into a severe knot. Her face was a roadmap of 60 years of life, but her eyes were sharp and shockingly clear. She wore the plain black uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, with no medals or flashy decorations, just a tiny blue planet stitched right over her heart. All around her, rising up in massive curved tiers like the inside of a giant bowl, were the delegates from 1,000 different civilizations. A few looked vaguely human, but most absolutely did not. There were beings that looked like they were carved from living stone, their bodies crackling with the heat inside them. There were creatures that shimmered in anti-gravity fields, their forms too fragile for a planet's pull. There were hive minds that spoke through dozens of bodies at once, and ancient beings that were just patterns of light trapped in crystal cages. Every single one of them was staring down at her, and not one of them looked friendly. On the highest tier sat the Council of 12, the rulers of the most powerful races in the known galaxy. These were beings who had held their power for thousands of years. They had seen younger races like humanity rise and fall like tides on an ancient shore. They weren't afraid of anything, and they certainly weren't afraid of humans. High Arbiter Kethvar of the Dominary Empire leaned forward. He was a tall, skeletal figure with skin the color of dried blood and eyes like molten gold. His people had conquered 300 star systems before humans had even figured out how to make fire. His voice boomed through the hall, instantly translated into 1,000 different languages. "You may speak, human. The Council grants you this courtesy, though we are under no obligation to do so." Vasquez didn't bow. She didn't flinch. She just gave a single, sharp nod and began. "Honored members of the Council, representatives of the Conclave," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I am not here today to beg. I am here to reason. 100 years ago, the races of this galaxy made a choice. You looked at humanity, and you saw a monster. So you put us under an embargo. You cut us off from trade, from travel, from any contact with the rest of the universe. You built a fence around our little corner of space and told us to stay inside." She paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. "For 100 years, we have honored that boundary. We have not crossed it. We have not fired on the ships that patrol our borders. We have ignored the insults and the taunts aimed at our people. We have been patient." A low chuckle rippled through the hall. A few of the representatives laughed out loud. The idea of humans being patient was apparently the joke of the century. Vasquez went on as if she hadn't heard a thing. "Today, I am asking you to reconsider. Not because we are weak and need your charity, and not because we are desperate with nowhere else to turn, but because this galaxy would be a better place if we could work together. We have so much to offer. All we ask for is the chance to prove it." She fell silent and just waited. For what felt like an eternity, the only sound was the faint hum of the hall's machinery. Then Kethvar rose to his feet. His robes, woven from the light of dying stars, flowed around him like liquid darkness. "The human speaks of patience," he sneered. his voice dripping with disgust. "But we remember what humans truly are. We have observed your species since you first crawled from your oceans. We saw how you treated your own kind, the wars, the atrocities, the endless, pointless violence." He waved one long, slender hand, and giant holographic images flared to life in the air. Pictures from humanity's past, armies on the march, cities engulfed in flames, mushroom clouds blooming over shattered landscapes. "This is humanity," Kethvar declared. "This is what you are. You talk about peace, but peace is not in your nature. You talk about cooperation, but you can't even cooperate with yourselves. How can we possibly trust you with the galaxy when you couldn't even be trusted with one little world?" Vasquez's expression never flickered. She knew this was coming. She'd seen these same pictures used as a weapon against her people 1,000 times before. "Those images are ancient history," she said quietly. "Some are hundreds of years old. We've changed." "Have you?" Kethvar shot back. "Your species has only been spacefaring for 300 years. That is nothing. It is the blink of an eye. My people have existed for 50,000 years, the Silthine for even longer. We have learned that a creature's true nature doesn't change so quickly. You are what you are, human. And what you are is a danger." He turned to face the full council. "I move that we reject the human petition. I also move that we strengthen the embargo. The containment strategy has worked for a century. Let it continue for another century. Let the humans stay in their cage until they prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they can be trusted." One by one, the other council members gave their support. The Silthine, whose bodies were like flowing mercury, spoke about the need for caution. The O-Rex hegemony, massive creatures covered in thick natural armor, spoke of the danger humans posed to weaker species. The crystalline minds of Fathas, who were living patterns inside perfect geometric crystals, showed mathematical models that predicted human expansion would shatter the stability of the galaxy. Not a single voice spoke up for humanity. The vote was unanimous. The petition was denied. But Kethvar wasn't done. "There is one final matter," he said, and a sudden cold silence fell over the hall. "For too long, we have been satisfied with simply containing the human threat. We have watched and waited, hoping they would accept their place. But our latest intelligence suggests that humans have been trying to develop new technologies, weapons that could threaten the very peace we have so carefully built." He let that sink in. "I propose we move from containment to active suppression. Any human ship found outside its designated zone will be destroyed on sight. Any human colony that shows the slightest sign of military buildup will be subject to immediate inspection and, if necessary, neutralization. We will not wait for the humans to become a threat. We will ensure they never get the chance." The hall exploded into a chaos of voices. Some argued that this was going too far. Others yelled that it didn't go far enough. But when the vote was finally called, the result was the same, unanimous. The containment directive was now a death sentence. Humanity wasn't just in a cage anymore. They were now scheduled for execution if they ever tried to rattle the bars. Vasquez stood through it all, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. When the votes were tallied, and the self-congratulatory murmurs died down, she spoke one last time. "I thank the Council for its time," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. I understand your decision. I don't agree with it, but I understand it." She scanned the massive hall, meeting the gaze of alien after alien. "You see us as dangerous children who can't be trusted with sharp toys. You think you're protecting the galaxy from us. You truly believe you are doing the right thing." She took a deep breath. "But I want all of you to remember this moment. Remember that we came to you in peace. Remember that we asked for nothing more than a chance. And remember that you turned us away, not for anything we have done, but for what you were afraid we might do." Kethvar actually laughed. "Is that a threat, human?" Vasquez shook her head slowly. "No, High Arbiter. It's not a threat. It's a warning. You have made your choice today. I just pray you understand the consequences. I pray you don't live to regret it." The laughter spread like a virus through the hall. The idea that little humanity could make the mighty conclave regret anything was the most hilarious thing they'd heard in centuries. Vasquez didn't even crack a smile. She just gave a single, formal bow, turned her back on them, and walked out of the great hall. Her shuttle was waiting for her at the diplomatic dock. It was a tiny ship, barely big enough for a crew of 3, painted the boring gray of Earth's diplomatic fleet. Next to the colossal warships that filled the station's other berths, it looked like a child's toy. Her aide, a young man named Thomas Chen, was waiting anxiously at the airlock. His face was pale and tight with fury. "I watched the whole thing," he said as she stepped aboard. "They didn't even listen. Their minds were made up before you even opened your mouth." Vasquez nodded. "I know." "Then why? Why did we come all this way? Why did we let them humiliate us like that?" The ambassador looked at him, and for the first time he saw a deep sadness in her eyes. "Because we had to try, Thomas. We had to give them every possible chance. We had to be absolutely 100% certain that there was no other way." "No other way to what?" Vasquez didn't answer right away. She just walked over to the shuttle's small viewing portal and stared out at the endless sea of stars. "Take us home," she said softly. As the little shuttle pulled away from the station, the conclave had already moved on to other business, completely forgetting the small human woman who had come to plead for her people. They would remember her very soon. 3 days later, the shuttle crossed the border back into human territory. Thomas was expecting to see the familiar sight of their patrol ships, the small fleet that always guarded their borders. But there was nothing, just empty space. "Where are the patrols?" he asked, a knot of worry tightening in his stomach. Vasquez smiled, a real, genuine smile. It was the first one he'd seen since they left Earth. "They've been reassigned." "Reassigned where?" The ambassador finally turned away from the window. "There are some things you need to know, Thomas. Things that almost no one knows. You'll get the full picture when we reach Earth. But there's one thing you need to grasp right now." Her eyes were sharp, locking onto his. "For decades, the galaxy has believed they've got us contained. They think they've locked us in a cage to stop us from being a threat. They couldn't be more wrong. We weren't contained. We were hiding." A shiver went down Thomas's spine. "Hiding from what?" "Not from something," she corrected. "Hiding ourselves. Hiding what we've become." "I don't get it." Vasquez put a hand on his shoulder. "You will. And soon. So will everyone else." As their shuttle pushed deeper into human space, something stirred in the void behind them, something impossibly vast that had been waiting patiently for a very long time. The conclave had made its decision. It had painted humanity as the enemy. It had decided to cage them, suppress their growth, and get ready to wipe them out. It had chosen annihilation. It just had no idea whose annihilation it had chosen. On the Dominari border, Captain Thrall of the patrol fleet got his new orders: shoot on sight. No warnings, no second chances. Any human ship caught outside its designated zone was to be vaporized instantly. He read the command with a grim smile. For 30 years, he'd stared across that border. For 30 years, he'd been waiting for them to make a move. Now, he finally had the green light. He glanced at the 300 warships of his fleet, each one a planet killer compared to the primitive human vessels. This wouldn't even be a fight. "Let them come," he announced to his officers. "Let them try to break their chains. We will show them the cost of defiance." His officers let out a cheer. And in the silent darkness between the stars, something was watching them. Something ancient, something patient, something human. Deep within its metallic heart, a sleeping giant began to stir. The countdown was on. In her private quarters on the shuttle, Ambassador Vasquez gazed at a single photograph. It was of a young woman in a military uniform, smiling warmly for the camera. Her daughter. She was killed 40 years ago when a Dominari patrol accidentally destroyed a human medical transport. They'd called it a tragic mistake. They'd offered money. They'd promised it would never happen again. But it did happen, over and over and over. Hundreds of ships, thousands of lives lost, all just mistakes, all just accidents, none of them ever punished. The galaxy thought humans were dangerous because they were violent. They were wrong. Humans were dangerous because they were patient. They planned, and they never, ever forgot. Vasquez shut her eyes, whispering a single word. Soon. In the great hall of the conclave, the red warning crystals pulsed, unnoticed. The representatives went about their business, forging alliances and fighting their petty squabbles, playing the same old games. Not a single one of them noticed the human ambassador wasn't defeated when she left. Not a single one of them caught the faint smile she hid as she walked out the doors. None of them had a clue that they had just made the single worst decision in the history of the galaxy. But they would learn. Soon they'd understand everything, and by then it would be far too late. Captain Thrall stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominari warship Eternal Judgment, and stared into the blackness ahead. For 30 years, this was his life, watching, waiting, staring at an imaginary line that marked the edge of human space. He had to admit it was profoundly boring. The human border was the armpit of the Dominari fleet. Nothing ever happened. The humans knew their place. They'd fly their pathetic little ships right up to the line, then turn around like the cowards they were. In 3 decades, Thrall had never fired a single shot in anger. But now, that was all about to change. The new directives had come down just days ago. The containment protocol was now absolute. Any human vessel outside its zone was to be destroyed on sight. No warnings, no mercy. For the first time in a century, the Dominari were cleared to take the fight to the humans. Thrall was pleased. No, he was more than pleased. He was thrilled. After 30 years of doing nothing, he'd finally get to do the job he was trained for. He would finally show these upstarts why the Dominari had ruled the stars for 50,000 years. His fleet was a sight to behold. 300 warships, locked in a flawless defensive grid along the border. Each ship was a pinnacle of Dominari engineering, perfected over millennia. Their weapons could shatter planets. Their shields could laugh off the heat of a sun. Their crews were the best soldiers in the galaxy. What did the humans have? Nothing. Their ships were crude toys, barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were a joke. Their defenses might as well not exist. If the humans were stupid enough to try something, they'd be wiped from existence in seconds. "Captain," his sensor officer interrupted, "I'm picking up an anomaly." Thrall turned away from the main view screen. "What kind of anomaly?" "A gravitational disturbance, sir. Roughly 12,000 kilometers off the starboard bow." Thrall frowned. "Source?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are all over the place. It just phases in and out with no real pattern. Could it be a natural event?" The sensor officer paused. "It's possible, sir, but the signature doesn't match anything on record. It almost looks like something massive is moving through space, but we can't get a visual on it." A flicker of unease pricked at Thrall, but he swatted it away. The Dominari didn't feel fear. They didn't run from shadows. "Keep monitoring it," he commanded. "Let me know if anything changes." "Yes, Captain." For the next few hours, the anomaly kept blinking in and out of existence. Sometimes it was closer, sometimes farther, but it never fully vanished. It felt like something was circling his fleet, watching, studying. Thrall dismissed it as nothing. Space was filled with weird phenomena. Gravitational ghosts from dying stars, ripples in space-time. There was nothing out there, nothing to be afraid of. And then the message came. It blasted across every frequency at once, overriding every channel the fleet used. A human voice, perfectly calm, speaking flawless Dominari. "This is the UNC Prometheus. We request that you stand down your forces and withdraw from this sector. You have 1 standard hour to comply." For a moment, the bridge was dead silent. Then, Thrall started to laugh. "1 ship?" he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "A single ship is demanding my entire fleet withdraw?" His officers joined in the laughter. The idea was beyond absurd. 1 ship against 300. It was suicide. It was insanity. It was the most ridiculous bluff any of them had ever heard. Thrall strode to the communications console and opened a channel. "Attention, human vessel. This is Captain Thrall of the Dominari Imperial Fleet. I don't know where you're hiding, but I suggest you show yourself. Your demand is denied. You have exactly 1 minute to surrender, or we will hunt you down and destroy you." There was a brief pause. Then, the calm human voice returned. "Captain Thrall, we are fully aware of your fleet's capabilities. We also know about your new shoot-on-sight orders. We are not here to surrender. We are here to give you 1 chance to survive. Please withdraw. This is not a request you want to decline." Thrall's anger flared. The sheer arrogance of these humans was unbelievable. They were nothing, they had nothing, and yet they dared to threaten him. "Find that ship," he barked at his sensor officer. "I want its location now." "I'm trying, Captain, but I can't get a lock. There's nothing on our sensors. Absolutely nothing." "That's impossible. We're receiving their transmission." "I know, sir, but all our sensors show is empty space." Thrall growled in frustration. The humans were playing some kind of game. They must have found a primitive trick to fool Dominari sensors. But it didn't matter. 1 ship, no matter how clever, was no match for his fleet. "All ships," he commanded, "break formation and begin a systematic search pattern. Find that vessel, and the moment you do, obliterate it." His fleet began to move, warships peeling away from the grid and fanning out across the sector. They scanned every frequency, every wavelength, searching every shadow. They found nothing. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 40. The human voice spoke again. "Captain Thrall, you have 20 minutes remaining. This is your final warning. We have no desire to harm you, but we will defend ourselves if forced. Please, withdraw." Thrall slammed his fist on the console. "Show yourself, you coward! Stop hiding and face us." There was a long silence. "Very well," the human voice finally said. "If you insist." Space ripped open. There was no other way to describe it. 1 second, there was only the black void. The next, something colossal was tearing its way into reality, as if the universe itself was being peeled back to reveal what lay beneath. The Prometheus Decloaked. Thrall had seen a lot in his 3 centuries of life. He had seen stars collapse. He had seen entire worlds burn. He had witnessed the most powerful warships in the galaxy tear each other apart. But he had never, ever seen anything like this. The human ship was enormous. Not just big, but impossibly, incomprehensibly massive. It made his flagship look like a toy. It dwarfed his entire fleet. Its hull was a night-black metal, all sharp angles and predatory lines, covered in weapons systems that Thrall couldn't even begin to identify. The surface seemed to drink the light, making it hard to focus on, and from its bow jutted a single, gigantic cannon that pulsed with barely contained energy. For a long, stunned moment, the bridge was utterly silent. Then his sensor officer spoke, his voice a terrified whisper. "Captain, that ship is 10 kilometers long." Thrall couldn't find the words to respond. He was totally speechless. "Its power signature. I've never seen anything like it. It's putting out more energy than our entire fleet combined. And its weapons. Captain, I don't even recognize some of these. They're not in any of our databases." "That's impossible," Captain Thurkal finally managed to choke out. "The humans don't have this kind of tech. They can't." But the proof was hanging right there in space in front of him, silent, patient, waiting. Then the human's voice came through again, and this time Thurkal heard something new in it. It wasn't arrogance or aggression. It was something far worse. Pity. "Captain Thurkal, this is Admiral Chen Wei of the United Nations Space Command. You've seen our ship. You get what you're up against now. I'm giving you one last chance to back off. Take your fleet and go home. Tell your leaders what you saw here today. Tell them the containment has failed. Tell them humanity isn't what they thought." She paused for a moment. "But whatever you do, don't fight us. You can't win, and I really don't want to have to kill you." Thurkal felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Pure, gut-wrenching fear that made his heart pound and his hands shake. But he was Dominari. They didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They fought until they won, or they died. "All ships," he commanded, his voice sounding way calmer than he felt. "Target that vessel. Prepare to fire on my mark." His officers just stood there. "Captain," his first officer said softly, "maybe we should reconsider." "I gave you an order," Thurkal roared. "We are Dominari. We don't run from anyone. Target that ship and get ready to fire." Slowly, hesitantly, his fleet of 300 warships aimed their weapons at the single ship, the Prometheus. Missile ports opened, energy cannons charged up, and targeting systems locked on. On the main screen, the human ship just sat there, completely still, as if it were waiting. "Admiral Chen," Thurkal broadcast, "this is your final warning. Surrender now or we will annihilate you." The reply was instant. "Captain Thurkal, I was hoping you'd be smarter than this. I was hoping you'd see the logic here, but I get it. You're a proud people. You've never known defeat. You don't know how to back down." There was another pause. "I am truly sorry for what's about to happen." A shiver went down Thurkal's spine, but he ignored it. "All ships, fire! 300 warships unleashed absolute hell. Thousands of missiles shot across the void. Beams of every color imaginable sliced through the darkness. Nuclear warheads went off in a massive, fiery chain reaction. It was enough firepower to shatter a planet, to crack a moon in half, to snuff out a small star, and it slammed into the Prometheus, and did absolutely nothing. The human ship didn't even try to dodge. It just took the full force of the attack like a mountain in a rainstorm. Explosions blossomed against its hull and simply vanished. Energy beams hit invisible shields and fizzled out into nothing. Missiles detonated in brilliant flashes that lit up the ship for a second before it was dark again. When the smoke cleared, the Prometheus was floating there, without a single scratch. Thurkal stared at his screen, completely stunned. "How?" he whispered. "That's not possible." His sensor officer's voice was shaking. "Captain, their shields. I've never seen readings like this. Our weapons didn't even make a dent. It was like we were shooting at empty space. They absorbed all of it, every last bit." On the screen, the Prometheus finally started to move. It turned slowly, deliberately, to face Thurkal's flagship, the Eternal Judgment. The massive cannon on its front began to glow with an intense light. Admiral Chen's voice came over the comms one last time. "That was a bad move, Captain." The Prometheus fired. A single beam of light shot out from the human ship. But it wasn't just light. It was something else, something that seemed to bend space itself as it flew. It moved faster than Thurkal's eyes could track, faster than his sensors could even register. It hit the Eternal Judgment. There was no fireball, no flying debris, no final screams over the radio. The ship just ceased to exist. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Not blown up, erased, like it was never even built. The beam kept going, right through the space where the flagship had been. It hit the ship behind it, and the one behind that, and the next. 6 Dominari warships vanished in the blink of an eye. Thurkal was dead before he even knew what hit him. His last thought wasn't about his family or his empire. It was just one simple, terrifying realization. They were wrong about the humans. They were so wrong. The entire battle was over in 4 minutes. The remaining Dominari ships scattered, fleeing in every direction, their crews screaming for help on every channel. They yelled about monsters and demons, about a ship that couldn't be hurt and couldn't be stopped. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and just watched them run. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a deep sadness. "Should we go after them, Admiral?" her tactical officer asked. Chen just shook her head. "No, let them go. Let them tell the galaxy what they saw here today." She turned away from the view screen. "We gave them a chance. We gave them every possible chance to walk away. They're the ones who chose not to listen." The Prometheus floated alone in space, surrounded by the ghostly energy signatures of the ships it had erased. 287 Dominari warships gone in 4 minutes. The human ship hadn't taken a single point of damage. In the distance, the survivors kept running, carrying their terrifying message to the rest of the galaxy. The containment has failed. Humanity is awake, and they are coming. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, every major power had picked up the distress calls. Within days, the recordings were everywhere. Shaky video from the fleeing ships showed the impossible. A single human vessel, bigger than anything they'd ever seen, wiping out an entire Dominari fleet in minutes. The galaxy watched in stunned horror. On 100,000 different worlds, leaders gathered to watch the footage. They saw Dominari weapons splashing harmlessly against human shields. They saw the Prometheus fire, that awful beam, deleting warships like they were typos in a document. They heard the raw terror in the voices of the survivors, and they all asked themselves the same question. How? How did the humans build a ship like that? How did they hide it for so long? How did the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy miss something this big happening right under their noses? The answer was simple, even though nobody wanted to admit it. They had been arrogant. They had been lazy. They had looked at humanity and saw only what they wanted to see. And now, they were about to pay the price for their blindness. Admiral Chen sat alone in her quarters on the Prometheus, looking at a photo on her wall. It was of a young man in a military uniform, smiling that confident smile that only the young have. Her son, David. He'd been dead for 53 years now, killed by the Silthene. Their raiding party had hit a human colony ship, saying it had wandered into their space. 3,000 colonists died that day, including David and his entire family. Chen's grandkids, who she'd never even gotten to meet, were just 4 and 6 years old. The Silthene paid a fine. They said they were sorry. They promised it would never happen again. But it did happen again, to other families, with other kids. For a century, the galaxy had treated human lives like they were cheap, and humanity had to just take it because they didn't have a choice. Well, now they had a choice. Chen closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. 100 years ago, humanity had stumbled upon faster-than-light travel. It was a total accident, a weird side effect of some other experiment. Within a decade, humans were on 30 different worlds. Within 2 decades, they met their first aliens. That didn't go so well. The galaxy looked at humanity and was terrified. Here was this young species, barely out of the Stone Age, already reaching for the stars. A species with a brutal history of war. A species that multiplied like crazy and spread even faster. A species that just wouldn't stay in its lane. The older, wiser civilizations had seen this before. They remembered other species that rose too fast and got too big for their britches, eventually becoming a threat to everyone else. None of those species were around anymore. The verdict was unanimous. Humanity had to be contained. The embargo was brutal. Cut off from galactic trade, human colonies started to fail. Without access to alien tech, their ships were stuck in the past. With no allies, they were defenseless. Dominari patrols would accidentally destroy human ships all the time. Silthene pirates would raid colonies without fear of punishment. The Aurak's hegemony even poisoned their trade routes with bioweapons, and there was nothing humanity could do about it. For the first 10 years, they begged. They sent diplomat after diplomat to the Galactic Council, asking for recognition, for trade, for just a little bit of mercy. They were told no every single time. For the next 10 years, they protested. They pointed out how unfair it was, how cruel, how hypocritical. They were completely ignored. For the third decade, they just tried to survive. They pulled back, stopped exploring, and kept to themselves. The rest of the galaxy figured they'd finally given up and accepted their place. The galaxy was dead wrong, because deep inside human space, far away from any prying eyes, they had found something. It was a dead world, circling a dying star, littered with the ruins of a civilization so ancient it made the galaxy's oldest empires look like toddlers. This was where humanity found the secret to their survival and their revenge. The beings who lived here, the ones humans called the precursors, were long gone. Nobody knew their real name or where they went. But what they left behind was technology that bordered on magic. Weapons that could shatter planets, shields that could laugh at a star's fury, and engines that made the vastness of space feel small. Most importantly, they left behind the knowledge of how to build it all, a blueprint for becoming gods. Humanity spent 90 long years deciphering that blueprint. It wasn't easy. Precursor tech forced them to rewrite the laws of physics, to unlearn everything they thought they knew. Generations of scientists threw their entire lives at the problem. But if there's one thing humanity is good at, it's being stubborn. 30 years ago, the first ship built with that knowledge rolled off the line. It was a tiny thing, barely bigger than a standard patrol boat, but it carried enough firepower to make the galaxy's mightiest dreadnoughts look like toys. They tested it in the deepest shadows of space, cloaked by tech the old races couldn't even dream of detecting. And then they started building more. The Prometheus was the 20th ship of the line, and she was the biggest, baddest one yet. Her crew nicknamed her the Harbinger, because they knew her first appearance would signal the end of an era. Admiral Chen glanced at the photo of her son one last time. "We tried, David," she whispered. "We really tried every other way, but they wouldn't let us be. They wouldn't stop hurting us." She squared her shoulders and walked out the door. "Now," she muttered, "they get to learn what happens when you push humanity too far." The bridge was a storm of controlled chaos. Officers moved with purpose, their stations lit up with frantic communications from every corner of the galaxy. The news of the battle had sent a shockwave through civilized space, and every government was scrambling for answers. "Admiral, on the bridge!" an officer called out, and the crew instantly snapped to attention. "As you were," Chen said, striding to her command chair. "Give me the latest." Her executive officer, Captain Marcus Webb, handed her a data slate. "The recordings have hit every major power, Admiral. The Conclave has convened an emergency session. We're seeing fleet movements everywhere." "They're scared," Chen stated. It wasn't a question. "Terrified, ma'am," Webb confirmed. "Our analysts figure they're stripping their borders bare to form one massive response fleet. Current projections put them at 50,000 warships, ready to move within the month." Chen just nodded. "Good." Webb blinked, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Good, ma'am. 50,000 ships in one spot is a lot easier to deal with than 50,000 ships scattered across the galaxy," she said calmly. "This way, we only have to break them once." A chilling silence fell over the bridge. Every single person there knew exactly what that meant. This was it. War. Absolute, total, and unavoidable. And this time, humanity was going to win. "Admiral," the comms officer interrupted. "Transmission coming in from Earth. Priority Alpha." The main view screen shimmered, and the face of President Elena Rodriguez appeared. She was a small woman with piercing eyes, carrying the quiet steel of someone who had been waiting for this day her entire life. "Admiral Chen," she began, her voice steady, "I've reviewed your report. The engagement went according to plan." "Yes, Madam President. Total enemy losses. 0 casualties on our side. And the witnesses? The ones who got away? They escaped, ma'am, just as planned. By now, the whole galaxy knows what we did." Rodriguez gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Then it's time, Admiral. By the power vested in me as President of the United Earth Government, I am officially issuing War Order Alpha. You are cleared to commence Operation Revelation." Chen's heart hammered against her ribs. They had drilled for this, planned for this, dreamed of this. But hearing the order spoken aloud sent a shiver down her spine. "Understood, Madam President. Operation Revelation is a go." "Show them, Admiral," the President said, her voice a low, intense command. "Show them what we've become. Show them what a century of their cruelty has forged." "Yes, ma'am." The screen went black. Chen turned to her crew. They were all looking at her, their expressions a mix of fierce resolve and quiet apprehension. These were her people. They'd trained, fought, and bled for this moment. They knew the cost, and they were ready to pay it. "You heard the President," Chen announced, her voice ringing with authority. "Operation Revelation is a go. All ships, prepare for immediate deployment." She let the words hang in the air for a moment. "For 100 years, the galaxy has treated us like vermin. They've murdered our people, shattered our fleets, and told us we were nothing, that we deserved to be nothing, that we would always be nothing." Her voice rose, filled with cold fire. "Today, that lie dies. Today, we show them the real face of humanity. Not the backward children they thought we were, but something much, much older and far more dangerous." A thin, cold smile touched her lips. "We're the species that holds a grudge. We're the species that never, ever quits. We're the species that always finds a way, no matter how long it takes, no matter how impossible the odds." She stood tall. "We offered them peace. We offered them diplomacy. We offered them patience. They chose to make us their enemy. They chose to back us into a corner." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, laced with menace. "And now they get to see what happens when the thing in the corner bites back." She turned toward the vast star field on the view screen. "All ships, commence Operation Revelation. Today, the galaxy gets a history lesson. Across the hidden corners of human space, the doors to 100 secret shipyards slid open. From cloaked bases on forgotten moons and deep space stations, a ghost fleet rose. Some were as massive as the Prometheus. Some were even larger. Every single one was armed with weapons the galaxy couldn't comprehend, and wrapped in shields it couldn't scratch. For 100 years, humanity had hidden. For 100 years, humanity had built. For 100 years, humanity had waited. The waiting was over. The human fleet began to move, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble. In the grand assembly of the conclave, the glowing crystals that represented the great powers had turned from red to black, a color unseen for thousands of years. It meant only one thing: extinction. Someone's end was coming, and for the first time in their very long histories, the other races of the galaxy weren't so sure it was going to be humanity's. The Conclave had never known a day like this. In its 12,000-year history, it had seen empires rise and fall, wars begin and end. It had watched species achieve greatness and others fade to dust. But it had never, not once, seen raw panic. Until today. Representatives from 1,000 worlds swarmed the Great Hall, a chaotic mess of fear and finger-pointing. The usually dignified tiers were packed with shouting, frantic figures who had completely lost their composure. "How could this happen?" shrieked the Cillian ambassador, his liquid metal body swirling in distress. "You told us the humans were contained. You said they were primitive." "We were lied to," bellowed a delegate from the Oryx hegemony, his huge armored body shaking with fury. "Someone must have aided them. They couldn't develop this technology on their own." "It doesn't matter how," another voice cried out. "What are we going to do now?" High Arbiter Kethvor stood in the eye of the storm, his face a mask of cold rage. His best fleet was gone, vaporized, his most celebrated captain erased. And everywhere he looked, he saw fear and blame staring back at him. "Silence!" he roared, his voice slicing through the pandemonium. The hall quieted, but the air was still thick with tension. This is not a time for blame. It is a time for action. He waved a hand, and holographic images of the Prometheus and the slaughter it had caused filled the air. "The humans have shown their hand," Kethvor said, his voice grim. "They are not the simple species we assumed. They are something far more dangerous." He paused, letting the reality sink in. "But they are still just one species. They have limited numbers, limited resources. If we unite, if we strike now, we can still crush them." "With what?" the Steine ambassador shot back. "Did you not see the recordings? That one ship wiped out nearly 300 of our most advanced warships. How many more do they have? How many more of those weapons?" "We don't know," Kethvor admitted, the words tasting like ash. "Our intelligence on their territory has always been poor. We assumed we didn't need to know more." "You assumed," the Silene hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You assumed. And now we all might pay for your arrogance." High Arbiter Kethvorin's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Watch your tone, Ambassador. The Silene were just as certain about that containment field as we were. You have no right to point fingers." But before the argument could explode, a new voice sliced through the tension. "High Arbiter, we're getting a transmission." The Grand Hall fell dead silent. Every single eye swiveled to the communications console, where a Dominari officer's hands were flying across the controls. "Source?" Kethvorin demanded. "It's human space, sir. They're broadcasting it on all frequencies, every wavelength. They aren't even trying to hide it." "Put it on screen." The holographic war maps vanished, replaced by a single human face. It was a woman, elderly, but with eyes as sharp as fractured glass, dressed in the simple black uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Ambassador Vasquez," Kethvorin breathed. "Greetings, Conclave," she said, her voice echoing with a calm that was more terrifying than any threat. "I trust you remember me." A nervous murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Most of them had been here a century ago, when Vasquez had first pleaded humanity's case. Most of them had laughed her out of the hall. Nobody was laughing now. I warned you, Vasquez said, her voice unwavering. When I stood in this very spot, I told you all to remember that day. I told you that you would come to regret your choice, and judging by your faces, I see you finally do. She offered a slight smile, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in it. For 100 years, you treated us as less than nothing. You murdered our people. You blasted our ships from the sky. You poisoned our colonies and called it pest control. You told us we were nothing but animals, fit only for a cage. Her voice turned to steel. You were wrong about everything. The image behind her flickered, revealing the battleship Prometheus, now flanked by dozens of other massive vessels, each one bristling with weapons technology the galaxy had never conceived of. This is the human fleet, she declared. The fleet we built while you were watching us and laughing. The fleet we prepared while you patted yourselves on the back for how cleverly you had contained us. The image changed again, showing colossal shipyards teeming with thousands more ships under construction. And this is what's coming next. Every day we build more. Every single day we get stronger. While you were busy playing your political games and fighting your pathetic little wars, we were getting ready for this moment. Vasquez's face filled the screen again. We don't want war, she said, her tone softening slightly. We never did. All we ever wanted was to be left alone, to live in peace, and to be treated as equals. She paused, letting the words sink in. But you wouldn't allow that. You chose to make us your enemies. You chose to see us as a threat that needed to be stamped out. And now, you will face the consequences of that choice. What do you want? Kethvorin demanded, striding forward. Name your price, human. Vasquez's smile returned. It's simple, High Arbiter. We want exactly what we asked for 100 years ago. Recognition. Fair trade, the right to travel freely among the stars, the right to be treated like a civilized species. And if we agree, Kethvorin pressed, then this war is over before it even starts. Your ships won't be turned to dust. Your worlds won't be set ablaze. Your people will live. His jaw clenched. And if we refuse? Vasquez's smile vanished. Then you will discover what humanity is truly capable of, and I promise you, you will not enjoy the lesson. She paused one last time. You have 3 days to give us your answer. Use them wisely. The transmission cut out, and the hall exploded into chaos. We have to surrender, one delegate yelled. We can't fight that. Surrender to humans? Never, another roared. We are the masters of this galaxy. Did you not see the recordings? Did you not see what they did to our fleet? One battle doesn't decide a war. We can still win this. Kethvorin stood at the eye of the storm, his mind a whirlwind. He was Dominari. His people had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They had never surrendered, never retreated. The very thought was an insult. But he had seen the battle footage. He'd watched his best ships get deleted from existence, as if they were nothing more than a child's toy. And he couldn't shake the chilling certainty that he'd only seen a tiny glimpse of humanity's true power. Silence, he bellowed. We will vote, all in favor of accepting the human terms. A few hands went up. The merchant guilds, some of the smaller races, those who valued profits over pride. All in favor of resistance? More hands shot up. The Dominari, naturally. The Orax hegemony, and several of the other warrior cultures. But it wasn't a united front. The Silene ambassador glided forward, its liquid silver body calming from a turbulent churn to a perfectly smooth surface. "The Silene will abstain from this vote," it announced in a serene, synthesized voice. "We have run our own calculations. We have analyzed the battle data. We have projected the probable outcomes of a continued war." It paused dramatically. "Our conclusion is that resistance is futile. The war is already over. We just haven't finished fighting it yet." A collective gasp echoed through the hall. "What are you saying?" Kethvorin demanded, stunned. "I am saying that the Silene will not die for your pride, High Arbiter. We are withdrawing from the Conclave Alliance. We will seek a separate peace with the humans." "You can't do that. The Conclave Charter—" "The Charter assumes the Conclave can protect its members," the ambassador interrupted smoothly. "It cannot protect us from this. Therefore, we are leaving." The Silene ambassador turned and began to flow towards the exit. After a moment of shocked silence, other delegations started to follow. The merchant guilds, the crystalline miners of Fastus. One by one, species began to peel away from the Alliance, scrambling to save their own skins. Within an hour, the great conclave had shattered. Kethvorin was left standing alone in the vast hall, surrounded only by the diehards, the Dominari, the Orax, and a handful of others either too proud, too stubborn, or too foolish to see the truth. "Very well," he said, his voice as cold as deep space. "Let the cowards run. Let them beg the humans for mercy. We will not bow. We will not kneel. We will fight until the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath." His officers roared in approval. But deep down, in a secret part of his soul he would never acknowledge, Kethvorin wondered if he was leading his people to glory, or to their utter extinction. 2 days later, Ambassador Vasquez returned. The great hall was nearly empty now. Most species had already withdrawn to make their own deals with humanity. Only the Dominari and their staunchest allies remained, their delegations arranged in a pathetic show of defiance. Vasquez walked to the center platform. Her footsteps echoed in the cavernous silence. She looked older, weary in a way that had nothing to do with age. "High Arbiter Kethvorin," she began. "I have received the replies from the various species. I see that you and your allies have chosen to reject our terms." "We have," Kethvorin said, his voice dripping with pride. "The Dominari do not surrender. The Dominari do not bow to lesser species. Whatever you've built, whatever weapons you've made, we will find a way to break them. We will fight you to the very end." Vasquez nodded slowly. "I expected as much. I had hoped for better, but I expected this." She glanced around the hollowed-out hall at the few who remained. "I want you to understand something, High Arbiter. We never wanted this. Everything that's about to happen, we tried to stop it. We sent diplomats. We filed petitions. We begged for peace." Her voice hardened. "And you refused. Every single time you refused. Your people murdered our people, and you laughed about it." She stepped closer to him. "We have a saying on Earth. Be careful what you wish for. You wished to make us your enemies. You wished to back us into a corner. You wished to force us to become the monsters you always claimed we were." She locked eyes with him. "Congratulations, High Arbiter. Your wish has been granted." She turned and started to walk away. "This isn't over, human," Kethvorin yelled after her. "We will fight. We will never surrender." Vasquez paused at the doorway without turning back. "Then you have chosen extinction," she said softly. "I'm sorry. We gave you every chance." She stepped out of the great hall for the final time. Behind her, the living crystals that formed the walls began to pulse with a new, strange color. A color darker than black, a color that seemed to drink the light from the air. It was the color of an ending. The war had begun, and it lasted for all of 3 months. Later, historians would write volumes trying to explain how an empire that ancient and powerful could collapse so fast. The Dominari Empire had stood for 50,000 years. They had conquered 300 star systems. They had crushed every enemy they'd ever encountered. And they fell in 90 days. The human fleet swept through Dominari space like a wildfire. Their ships were faster, their weapons were stronger, their shields were unbreakable. Every defensive line the Dominari scrambled to create was shattered. Every fleet they mustered was annihilated. Every world they swore to protect was taken. But the humans didn't just conquer. They did something far more terrifying. They offered mercy. Every Dominari world that surrendered was spared. Every officer who laid down their weapons was treated with dignity. Every civilian was protected. The humans didn't burn cities or carry out massacres. They didn't enslave or torture. They just took control and moved on. It was not what the Dominari expected. It was not what anyone expected. High Arbiter Kethvorin had promised his people a glorious last stand. He had promised them that the humans would finally show their true colors as the savage monsters everyone believed them to be. He had promised that history would prove him right. Instead, he could only watch in horror as world after world surrendered, and the humans proved to be more benevolent conquerors than the Dominari themselves had ever been. It was a humiliation that drove him to the brink of madness. The final battle unfolded in the skies above the Dominari homeworld. Kethvorin had gathered every last ship he had, every vessel that could still fly. 40,000 warships, forming a desperate sphere around their sun, a final, futile shield for the cradle of their civilization. This was all they had left, their last hope, their final defense. The human fleet appeared at dawn. From the bridge of his brand-new flagship, Kethvorin watched the sensors as the enemy ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. He'd steeled himself for the Prometheus, the single ship that had tormented his dreams for 3 months. But what he saw was so much worse. The Prometheus was there, all right. But it was no longer the biggest ship in the human fleet. Trailing behind it were vessels that defied imagination. Gigantic constructs, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that pulsed with barely contained energy. Ships that seemed to warp space around them, their hulls flickering in and out of focus as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. And there were hundreds of them, hundreds of ships, when any single one of them could have obliterated his entire fleet on its own. By the ancestors, his first officer whispered. What have they been building? Kethvorin didn't answer. He couldn't. For the first time in his very long life, he finally understood what humanity had done. The containment field hadn't stopped them. The trade embargo hadn't weakened them. A century of being abused hadn't broken them. It had only made them furious. The human fleet fanned out, forming a perfect sphere around the Dominari defenses. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. The two massive forces just stared each other down in the silent void. One, the masterpiece of 50,000 years of civilization. The other, the result of 100 years of quiet, burning rage. Then, Admiral Chen's voice crackled across every single communication channel. "Hi, Arbiter Kethvorin. This is Admiral Chen Wei of the United Nations Space Command. I'm speaking to you directly." Kethvorin squared his shoulders. Whatever was coming, he would meet it with dignity. "I'm listening, Admiral. You have fought well. Your people have shown great courage. You haven't surrendered, even when it was the only logical thing to do. I respect that. I don't need your respect, human." "Maybe not," Chen's voice replied. "But you have it anyway." There was a brief pause. "I am offering you one last choice, High Arbiter. Order your fleet to stand down. Surrender yourself and your senior officers to face trial for crimes against humanity. Let your people live. And if I refuse, then we will annihilate your fleet, every last ship, every last soldier. And when that's done, we will land on your homeworld and arrest your leaders anyway. The only difference will be how many of your people die before it's all over." Kethvorin felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't fear, not anymore. He'd been terrified for 3 months straight. He had watched his empire turn to dust, his people perish, his entire way of life collapse around him. There was simply no room left for fear. What he felt was something completely different, something he never expected. It was relief. He glanced around his bridge at the officers who had served him so loyally. Young men and women who had families waiting for them on the planet below. Soldiers who had just done their duty, followed their orders, and fought bravely in a war that wasn't their fault. They didn't deserve to die for his pride. "Admiral Chen," he said, his voice measured. "If I surrender, what happens to my people? They will live. Your civilization will go on. Your culture, your art, your history, all of it will be preserved. We aren't here to destroy you, High Arbiter. We're here to stop you from destroying us. And my leaders, my officers, they will be tried for their actions during the containment era. Those found guilty will be punished under human law. Those found innocent will be set free. And me? You ordered the deaths of thousands of humans over the last 3 months, High Arbiter. You will stand trial. The verdict will be based on the evidence." Kethvorin gave a slow nod. It was fair. More than fair, actually. It was far more merciful than he deserved, and far more merciful than he would have been if the roles were reversed. He looked at his officers one last time. Some of them were crying. Some were praying. Some just stood silently, waiting for his command. "First Officer Thrankel," he said quietly. "Yes, High Arbiter?" "You have a daughter, don't you, a little girl?" Thrankel swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. She is 7 years old." "What's her name?" "Sir?" Kethvorin closed his eyes. "She deserves to grow up with a father," he said. "All the children on that world deserve to grow up. All the families deserve a chance to stay together." He opened his eyes, his decision made. "We have lost this war. We lost it the second we chose to treat humanity as our enemies instead of our neighbors. Fighting longer won't change the outcome. It will only add more names to the endless list of the dead." He reached up and slowly unpinned the insignia from his uniform, the symbol of the High Arbiter, worn by Dominari leaders for 10,000 years. "Admiral Chen," he said, his voice unwavering, "I am ordering my fleet to stand down. I am surrendering myself and my senior officers into your custody. My only condition is that you keep your promise and spare my people." There was a long silence on the communication channel. Then Chen's voice came back, and for the first time, Kethvorin heard something other than cold professionalism. He heard genuine respect. "Your surrender is accepted, High Arbiter. Your people will be safe. You have my word." Kethvorin nodded. "Then it is done." He turned to his crew. "All ships, power down weapons and lower shields. The war is over." One by one, the Dominari warships went dark. 40,000 vessels, the pride of a 50,000-year-old empire, surrendered without firing a single shot. And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. 10 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy was a different place. The old order, built on fear, hierarchy, and the smug assumption that some species were just naturally superior, had completely fallen apart. In its place, something new was rising. A human-led coalition had replaced the old conclave. Membership was open to any species that agreed to its core principles: equality, cooperation, and the simple idea that every civilization had something of value to share. Many species had joined right away. The Silthene, who were among the first to surrender, had become some of humanity's strongest allies. The crystalline Festus opened their vast archives of knowledge, sharing discoveries that pushed galactic science forward by centuries. Even some of the old enemies, species that had fought beside the Dominari, eventually asked to join. The Dominari themselves were still rebuilding. Their empire was gone, replaced by a loose federation of independent planets. Their former leaders had faced trials, and many were serving long prison sentences for their crimes during the containment era. But the people had survived. Their culture lived on. Their children were growing up in a galaxy that was safer, if a little stranger, than the one their parents had known. Ambassador Yelena Vasquez, now much older, visited the Dominari homeworld on the 10th anniversary of the surrender. She walked slowly through the capital city, with a small escort of human and Dominari guards. The city was transformed. The massive monuments to conquest and power had been torn down, replaced with public parks and memorials. The avenues that once rumbled with military parades now bustled with markets and festivals, where species from all over the galaxy mixed together freely. Vasquez stopped at a memorial in the city center. It was a simple design, a long wall of polished black stone, etched with names. Thousands upon thousands of names, millions of names. The names of everyone who had died in the war, from both sides. Human names next to Dominari names, Silthene names next to Oryx names. All of them listed together, honored equally, mourned equally. She stood there for a long time in silence, reading the names, remembering. A young Dominari man approached her. He was tall and slender, with the red skin and golden eyes of his people, but his eyes held none of the arrogance Vasquez remembered from her past visits, only curiosity. "You're the human ambassador," he said, "the one from the old videos." Vasquez offered a faint smile. "I was, a long time ago. I'm retired now. My teachers talk about you. They say you tried to warn us. You tried to stop the war before it even started." "I tried," she said softly. "We all did." The young Dominari looked back at the memorial wall. "Why didn't you just wipe us out?" he asked. "You could have. Everyone knows it. Your fleet could have scorched our worlds and eliminated our people. It's what we would have done to you if things were the other way around. So why did you spare us?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question she'd been asked so many times over the years. She'd never found the perfect answer. Because, she finally said, that's exactly what they expected us to do. Your leaders, the Conclave, the whole galaxy, they all looked at humanity and saw monsters. They saw violence, aggression, and an instinct for destruction. They were convinced that was all we were. She turned to look the young Dominari in the eye. We spent 100 years in the dark, young man. 100 years completely alone, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, forced to rely on nothing but ourselves. We had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to decide who we really wanted to be. She gazed up at the stars, which were bright even in the planet's daylight. We could have become the monsters they feared. We could have let our anger and our pain consume us. We could have built our ships and our weapons and used them to burn down the galaxy that tried to lock us in a cage. She shook her head gently. But we decided to be something else instead. But we decided that wasn't who we wanted to be. We made a choice to be better than our enemies, better than our own past, and better than the galaxy ever dreamed we could be. She smiled, and this time it was genuinely warm. Humanity has messed up a lot, little one. We've caused so much pain, to ourselves and to others. But the one thing we're good at is learning. We can grow. We can choose to be better. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the names carved into the memorial wall. This wall is here because we refused to kill. We refused to destroy. All we ever wanted was to be free. And when we finally won that freedom, we decided to use our power to build things up, not tear them down. She turned back to face the young Dominari. That's why we spared your people, because you are not your leaders. You aren't the ones who tried to wipe us out. You're just folks trying to get by, hoping for a better tomorrow, and you absolutely deserve the chance to have one. The young alien stood silent for a long moment, letting her words sink in. Do you think we could ever be friends? He finally asked, his voice soft. Humans and Dominari, after everything? Vasquez thought about it for a second. I think friendship takes time, she said. It takes work. It means being willing to forgive what happened in the past and trusting that the future can be different. She looked him right in the eye. But yes, I think we can be friends. I think we will be friends, she continued. Maybe not today, and maybe not tomorrow, but someday. The children of Earth and the children of Dominar will look back on this time and barely even understand why their ancestors were ever enemies. She motioned toward the wall of names. This is why we built this. It's not here to remind us of the war, but to remind us what it cost. It's here to make sure that the next generation understands what happens when you let fear and hate take over. She turned and started to walk away. Wait, the young Dominari called out. Ambassador Vasquez? She paused. Thank you, he said, for sparing us, for giving us a second chance. Vasquez gave him one last smile. Use it well, young one. The future is in your hands now, yours, and all the other young people across the galaxy. Make it better than the past was. She walked off, leaving the young Dominari standing alone in front of the memorial. He stayed there for a long, long time, reading the names, thinking about every single thing she had told him. Finally, he turned and headed back toward the city, walking into a future that was weird and uncertain, but also brimming with possibility. The rest of the galaxy had expected humanity to choose extinction for their enemies. They learned far too late that humanity had chosen something else entirely. Not revenge, not conquest, not the fire and fury everyone was waiting for. They had chosen hope, and in the end, hope turned out to be the most powerful choice of all.